if you want to host like a group to play board games, if you want to play D&D, if you want to like work on creative writing, anything is kind of fair game.
That invitation to be curious and recognize that church is more than what church does.
You say, we care about you, whether or not you ever become a member of our church.
This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Hi, and welcome to this 99th episode of Pod Strangely Warmed. I know it doesn't feel like we've been around that long, but check the gray hair. We've been around a while. It is happening, and it is real. Today on the podcast, we continue this conversation based on Carey Nieuwhof's 5 disruptive trends for 2025, and I'm really excited to have an amazing crew from Union Coffee here with me. Carey Newsome, the lead pastor and executive director at Union. Thank you so much for being here. And Andrew Bennet, the chair of the board of directors, something like that.
Yeah, board
chair,
pretty much.
Important guy.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to the title a little bit. So,
and as we discussed before we got on, still grieving Dallas Mavericks fan.
Yeah, I should be wearing like sackcloth and have ashes for the next few months, but. Yeah, got dressed today.
I feel like we're having a flashback to like the late 90s where we're hoping for good draft picks again, right? Which is a sad place to be when we were in the finals last year. But
yeah, it's pretty wild. I don't think I'll ever get over it. I was 6 or 7 when we got Dirk Nowitzki, and so I have led a fairly charmed basketball life when it comes to the Dallas Mavericks. Yeah. So this is a new, wholly new feeling of like, this is pretty bleak.
Yeah, I'm about 10 years older than you, and I was watching every night in those mid to the Jamal, Jimmy Jackson, Jason Kidd era, where 3 really good players could not play a lick together, and it was bad again and again and again.
Yeah. And Union, we had a personal loss in this recent
we did.
trade.
Yeah.
We have a couple of Dallas Mavs that come regularly to Union. Maxi Cleaver, one of those, and
Maxi,
we didn't even get to say goodbye.
Oh, no. Well, we'll take a minute to your camera, say goodbye to Maxi, so that he knows just how much he is
not
appreciating.
Goodbye, just see you later.
Right. Well, and by all accounts, one of the best humans in professional sports, just in terms of generous of spirit, warm-hearted, and overall great guy. Yeah. Well, I grieve that. But I think it does give us a nice transition, Katie, into telling us a little bit. You've brought a couple of things that I think help us get to know you, but also Union as well. What do we have here?
So brought with me a brand new diner mug for Union. So you've got the first edition here.
Oh, nice.
As well as a pin. It has the little poop emoji with a halo and rainbow. Because at Union, we talk a lot about how God is in the business of taking the mess, the poop, if you will, and making it holy and finding the holy in things the world might deem profane. And that's a big piece of who we are and how we engage the world. And so you now have your own Union pin to remember that as well.
I love it. There is that reality of so often in church we get so focused on like making everything presentable, right? When it's God does amazing work in the muck and in the mire, the places of real struggle of our life, right? That's what it means to follow and serve a God of resurrection and redemption, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Death in the worst possible way is redeemed. And so why can't the holy poo of our life find its way to redemption as well? That's really cool. Yeah. Andrew, tell us a little bit about kind of your connection to Union and how that works out.
So it probably back in 2017, I grew up in the Methodist tradition, came back from college, and was really searching for a church or worshiping community that kind of was acknowledging the mess and the ugliness of life, but also engaging with it directly and talking about it. I also found moving back was not really enthused with the not traditional worship kind of presentation. Honestly, the contemporary
Okay.
worship
Yeah.
experience of that very polished, very
Concert in the name of Jesus kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. I was not really. I did not engage with that on a spiritual level. So ended up the youth pastor at my home church was involved with Union, invited me to come, and it was the first time that I had experienced in a Methodist church space.
Yeah.
Really real and difficult conversations about problems in our country or problems that we're all dealing with on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
And also a worship that felt authentic, that was not polished and pristine and Instagram worthy.
Right.
But was just people worshiping together. And there wasn't this pressure to keep everything perfect or have everything be.
Yeah.
And I think that's honestly what I responded to when I first started attending at Union, and then have since become more and more involved in the mess that is church life at Union. But yeah, that's kind of how I got introduced and started.
Very good. Katie, from what I know, I'm a Legacy Central Texas guy, and so we've heard about Union, but never kind of actively been connected or engaged in the same way, right?
Yes.
It sounds like Andrew's experience is part of the intentional reality that's been formed for the, 12, 13 years that Union has been around.
Yes.
And how long have you been connected as the kind of lead pastor, and what are some intentional things that y'all do day to day, week to week, to foster the kind of community Andrew just talked about?
Yeah, so I actually personally have a really unique relationship with Union as well, in that I was a seminary student at Perkins when I worked at a campus ministry, kind of maybe had my eyes opened for the first time into some of the inner workings of the church, and felt not great about that. And I had finished my first year of seminary and said, I'm not sure this is for me. But Union was getting started around that time. And so I started coming to Union as a seminary student, and really connected in for a lot of reasons Andrew named as well, just feeling like a really authentic space, there was nothing we were unwilling to talk about. And for me, that was extremely healing just in my personal journey, and wanting to know that ministry could be done in a really authentic way, in a way that felt really true to who I was as well. And so I became a member at Union, and Union sponsored me into my candidacy for ordained ministry. I think I am the first ordained candidate out of Union.
Very cool.
And got to serve other great churches for years, and then just really had the great honor of being appointed to Union. So I feel very honored to be at Union and love that. And I think some of the work that we do to create the kind of space that we've named is really comes from what is a theological foundation for us, which as good Methodists come from a John Wesley sermon.
Of course.
He has this sermon called On the Omnipresence of God, where he talks kind of on and on about how God is present in all things. He's proving that point. But then he gets to this seminal moment where he asks, what should we make of this awful consideration that God is present in all things?
Yeah.
Should we not labor continually to acknowledge his presence? And for Union, that is core to who we are. It's a part of our mission statement that we believe the divine spark is present in all things. And our job isn't to bring God to people, to a neighborhood, et cetera, but really to be about the work of cultivating what God is already up to in a people and in a neighborhood. Yeah. And while that might not seem like incredibly radical, in practice it is, to begin treating people as if that's true, communities as if that's true. And how does that shape how you show up for your neighbors in your neighborhood? So that's a big part of how we create that kind of space at Union.
Seeing the divine spark already alive and at work in our neighborhood and not putting our Christian superhero cape on and going, I'm going to bring Jesus to you, right?
Yeah.
Which has been the toxic pattern for how many years or decades or centuries, right? But to acknowledge the divine and help illuminate what God is already doing in our midst, and maybe give a name to something, right? That is powerful, but that is such a beautiful way of engaging with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that Union exists and that it was a part of your journey and a part of your journey too, Andrew, as we kind of seek to continue to be the body of Christ, right, into a new century. Y'all both use the word authentic at a couple of different points. And it's one of the words that shows up in Nieuwhof's kind of understanding. Now, he's coming from a little more of an evangelical, not quite fundamental perspective on kind of church leadership and development and that kind of thing. But he names the kind of, when he talks about the non-derivative church, right? The church that's not just, rinse and repeat. Here's your church starter kit. Get your black box. Get your concert in the name of Jesus. Get your preacher in skinny jeans and call it good and go, right? It's an image, isn't it?
It is.
And we got a lot
It's
of
evocative,
it. But he names that word authentic comes up a lot as kind of part of what people are truly seeking is a unique and distinct expression of Christianity that should differ based on what neighborhood you're in and who the community you're connected with it. If the divine spark is alive and at work in each and every neighborhood and each and every person, it should kind of manifest in distinctive in different ways. Just for curiosity's sake, what are some of those things that just structurally set, we've talked about the spirit of it, but the structure of what a standard week at Union looks like that make it different than kind of XYZ church that meets in a more traditional manner or kind of follows a more traditional pattern?
Yeah. Katie can speak more to just like all of the things that happen in a given week. One is like we don't typically worship on Sunday mornings. We've had worship in communities on Tuesday nights, on Thursday nights. We've had Sunday evening worship. We have like a new sort of meditative or guided meditation sort of worship that I think that does occur on Sundays. And a number of different like gatherings that are not explicitly like worship. I think of like Rainbow Inc. or Death Cafe that are like addressing a need for people that want to have a creative space, that want to have community. Also spaces where like people want to like give back to the community and aren't really sure how. I think those kinds of the way it manifests just gives the vibe to me that I know we will try anything like this is a church where like if you want to host like a group to play board games, if you want to play D&D, if you want to like meet to like work on creative writing, if you want to like have a Bible study on like cults or like weird religious doctrine, like we can do that. So like anything is kind of fair game, and I've that's been encouraging to me, where I'm always wondering like what can we do next that will draw people in and that will speak to something that maybe traditional church and it's like Sunday morning like sermon, concert for Jesus and then go home sort of format doesn't always work for folks. So I think the variety and the different manifestations of that is really exciting. It excites me.
Yeah, I would also say that for worship, it's still very untraditional, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
If the divine spark is in all things, then the divine spark is also in a Beyonce song or a Katy Perry song. And so we have, for our Tuesday night worship service, Kaneo, we have a house band. They're called the Misfit Whatevers, and they do all songs you would hear on the radio. We do mostly that, and then we always end with a traditional hymn.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
to varying success.
The ongoing joke is that the Misfits always mess up the hymn.
Okay.
But
we always get the hymn wrong.
that's okay. Kind of exploring this exercise, right, of inviting us to engage and be like, okay, where is God in this? And that's everything from the conversations we're having to the music. Sermons at Caneo are conversational. It is not a manuscript. It is not a nicely pre-packaged
It's not 20 minutes of Katie talking at people.
And honestly, a lot harder of a preaching gig to not know where a conversation might land. But I think it really engages the spirit of where people are and what real questions they might have.
Yeah.
And I've told people before, call me out if you think we've said something that doesn't feel right. And honestly, that's been the start of a lot of really great conversations for our community.
That looking for the divine spark in every element, whether it's in the music, in the conversation, in the intentional structure, and kind of not sage on a stage approach, but more of a facilitator of a conversation who's an informed facilitator, right? Right. But that kind of that method of preaching, I love that kind of this core grounding idea, right? That the divine spark is in everything, has found a way to ripple into all of the expressions of what you do, right? And I think when we're seeking authentic community, there may be folks watching this or listening to this who say, well, traditional church really does feed my soul, right?
Yeah.
And that's great. If it's are we living in an authentic way? Are we worshiping in an authentic way? And the hope is that each of us, God, we are Christians seeking after the loving, just, and free world God imagines for who? All people, right? And so there are going to be expressions of church that are our jam, and there are going to be expressions that aren't our jam but are yours, and thanks be to God, right? Kind of to help connect for some of our kind of more traditional folks. We've embodied this same spirit at a number of the churches I have pastored through some intentional sermon series. We did vinyl theology, right, where we took the Katy Perrys and the Beyoncés and those kind of things, and things that are kind of faith adjacent that speak spiritual truth through the lyric, through the music, and then we can kind of help identify and connect it back to what are more traditional expressions of faith, right? To unpack what is God saying to us in the midst of each one of these things. And that is kind of a meaningful thing, even in a more traditional setting, to live out that spirit that is being lived out in union kind of day by day. Andrew, you mentioned Death Cafe. That's a combination of words that we just got to spend a little more time unpacking, because it's one of those things that I'm sure hooked a lot of people. Katie or Andrew, either one.
Well, that sprung out of someone in our community who their work as a death doula, which I will try to explain it to the best of my, but it essentially just helps guide people through the process of planning for, and then like mourning and the grieving process of like just the conversations that you need to have around you have a family member or a loved one who is dying. Our community, Brittna, has really just run with that, and it's a monthly gathering, correct?
Yes.
Where people can just get together and like talk through whatever questions they might have or the things that they're struggling with. I hesitate to call it a support group. I mean, it is a group that supports each other. Again, I feel like it's very integral to like our mission is like we're going to have the conversations that are difficult, or we're going to have we're going to touch on the things that are maybe difficult to talk about, or that we just naturally try to shy away from. And so having that as a welcome part of like our community and a part of our programming is really exciting. So I mean that's kind of the general vibe of like what they do. I think later this month they're doing like come and work on like
it's an end of life planning.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
On April 5th. But yes, Brittna has been great, and we connected with Brittna because she's also an artist and goes to several markets to try and sell her art, and came to one of the markets in our backyard and connected with us there, wanted to start Death Cafe, and said, here's this little coffee shop that I love. Let me reach out to them. And that was the start of all of this. And really incredible things have fostered from that, beyond creating space for people to talk about death, in that it's become a really supportive community for each other. I know one of our folks who was unsheltered got connected in there and got connected with the right people, and in his journey to becoming sheltered again, also met someone else who gave him a car. Okay. And it's just a continuous healing in a multitude of ways.
Yeah.
Caring for each other, mind, body, and soul.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What we hope church is, right?
Yes.
That connection point, that hub of healing and renewal, mind, body, and soul for our entire community. Mm-hmm. One of the things I have loved to hear is a little bit. You've given us a window, right? We have not exhaustively, heard the entire Union story, and we would encourage anybody to go experience Union, right, as kind of a window into what that is like. As we think about this, we've got a lot of United Methodist churches that fall more onto the traditional expression of church, whether it's rock concert in the name of Jesus or not. Worship follows a more traditional pattern. Churches are organized in a more traditional way. But we're kind of at this inflection point as a denomination and as individual churches within that, where we're beginning to dream and ask what's next, right? We're beginning to kind of think about what is the next faithful expression of who we are and how do we want to live into that. Union had the joy of starting from scratch, right? Starting fresh. And there's real challenges with that, right? But there's also some freedom with that. But what would you say kind of from the experience of Union to a church that is, maybe not dying, but maybe not thriving and wondering, where is God leading us next? What would you invite them to? What are some practices you would invite them to maybe begin to explore and discern the next expression or another expression of their church?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we think of at Union and think about ourselves as is a laboratory for the church. And we've really thought of ourselves that way, I think, from our inception. We are clearly doing something kind of new, and who knows if it's going to work out. And it has worked out. It hasn't been without challenges, for sure.
Sure.
But we've learned a lot, and we jokingly but truthfully say there's nothing we won't try twice.
Okay.
And I think having that freedom to just say, let's give it a shot. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. And what did we learn from it?
Yeah.
So I think inviting churches to just have some free space to dream and really not be afraid of failure, because it's not always failure, right? I mean, some things don't work out, and it doesn't mean that people failed. It just is a part of learning your neighborhood and your community and the capacity of your church and your gifts. And so I think feeling free to dream would be a great kind of first practice. And then I also think to get to know your neighbors and wonder about your neighbors' stories and their needs. I think that, there's a lot of people that connect with Union that don't necessarily come to our worshiping communities, but they come to us as a coffee shop. Maybe a couple of times in, they find out that we're a church as well, and we do a lot of community engagement, but then realize that we've created a witness for the church, right?
Yeah.
We say we care about you, whether or not you ever become a member of our church.
Yeah.
And we care about that, just full stop, period. And I think for a lot of folks, that then creates space for them to potentially want to engage us in that way. I have become pastor to many people sitting at the bar of the coffee shop, who might never come to our worshiping community, right, but end up connecting and then entrusting us in those moments where they feel like they might need a pastor or they might need a worshiping community.
Yeah.
And so just the reminder that what church does should go way beyond what happens on Sunday morning in worship. That's obviously a key part of what we do.
Sure.
But the way we engage our neighbors, the way we tell our story and say that we want to care about you, kind of no ifs, ands, or buts, I think would be a great way to start exploring something new.
Yeah. That invitation to be curious, radically curious of our neighbor, and recognize that church is more than what church does. You said something in there, Katie, we're never afraid to fail twice. And that's a unique kind of spin on something we hear in a lot of places. Don't be afraid to fail, right? Because it will be a learning experience, right? You will be a different person on the back side of it than you were at the front end of it, right? And you'll be a different community. Talk to me a little about the importance of that last word, being willing to fail twice at something. I imagine there's an experience or two connected to that informs its presence with you.
Yeah, I feel like there have been several moments in Union's history where we have tried something and then thought, maybe this worked for a moment, and it was great for that moment. And now it's time to move on from that. And then, a couple months, maybe years later, somehow those things circle back around again. We have a program right now called Rainbow Inc.
Yeah.
It got started actually in 2020, so during the pandemic, and it was to create a space it was an exclusive space for queer writers.
Okay.
So exclusively for queer people. And it was that way to create a safe space. And so there were people who engaged in that group who were not publicly out. And that became just a great space of connection and healing for them. It went on for a couple years, but then it kind of just fizzled out. People weren't really coming anymore. And I think maybe finding needs met in other ways, right? We were on lockdown when that started. Things had changed. And a couple months ago, folks have revisited this conversation, and Rainbow Inc. is now running again. It's a little bit different. It's no longer exclusive, but still has that focus and is still a writing group from engaging in creative writing to helping support others in editing their creative writing to trying just here's a prompt. Let's all write for the next 30 minutes and see what happens. We once had a food truck, and we learned a lot from that. And we wrote a 10-page document of everything we learned about that we would be happy to share with anyone if you're thinking about that.
Your postmortem will help inform others. Yeah.
Right. And I have been surprised at how many times in the past year an idea around a food truck has been coming back up. And so I think that's what we mean when we say that something might have worked in a really specific time for a specific group of people. Yeah. And then things change, but then things might change again. Yeah. And we want to stay open to that.
The way the Spirit works is we don't ever get locked in one kind of way. I think sometimes in church, I'm curious about Union's experience of this, we have a really hard time letting go the first time, right? Like if something has kind of wound itself to its natural end, we have a hard time letting go. And sometimes the struggle and the pain and the kind of dysfunction of the process of letting that go to begin with makes it hard to come back when the Spirit kind of sparks it anew and afresh. Is there anything you have learned? Other than writing your 10-page postmortem on food truck ministry and the challenge and probably opportunity inherent within that. I'm sure it's not all, it can't be 10 pages if it just simply says, do not do this. Right? There's more to it there, right? Is there something you've kind of learned or experienced in that, being willing to let something go? So that you might say yes, maybe to it again or to something else?
Yeah, I think I've been impressed with Union's ability to decide with the input of like community members when it is time to like let something go, because I do distinctly remember growing up and spending some period of my youth like in those traditional worshiping spaces where like everyone wanted to talk about what we used to do, or everyone wanted to talk about, it's like, well, we've done this way for this long. And then to be involved at Union and have very real, honest discussions about like, is this worship setup? Is this time? Is this community? Is this still working for everyone? And if not, like, then we need to drop it, or we need to move on to something else, like kind of adapt or die. Yeah. So I've always been impressed when like we've had those pretty honest conversations, and they're difficult because nobody wants to admit like, yeah, this isn't working, or like, we're failing at this. So the first step for me was a lot of times was the letting go of like unclenching your fingers around something and acknowledging that it's not yours, it's all of ours. It's and also in a way it's God's. So like we're gonna if there's enough of kind of that. I mean, I also think the decision making has always been fairly like communal when it comes to those situations. So like if a certain Sunday school, Bible study, worshiping community is openly kind of engaging with that and saying this isn't working anymore, I think it gives a pastor and the planning team the ability to kind of pivot and choose maybe a different way to move forward. So the letting go, I think, is the part that is maybe toughest in some contexts. And it's the thing that I think I've been most impressed with, like at Union, when it comes to those, changing.
Yeah. Katie, is there anything in your experience there? Did Andrew kind of capture it?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think letting go is the hard part. And I think that for me, being at Union has really invited me to kind of change the way I think about that, in that it's not that these things have failed. They've been great for a time. Yeah. And in a Marie Kondo sense, we are thankful to it for that, Yeah. And it is time to move on. And a lot of times those decisions get made around things like, do we have the capacity to continue doing this? Yeah. If maybe key volunteers have stepped away and we have very limited staff capacity. And so sometimes they maybe are, there are real like resource questions at play in terms of continuing something. And I'll say too that can be really true for Union, just knowing we have a smaller staff. But I've also found, we have a lot of people really interested recently in doing a lot more community building activities. And I kind of returned that and said, I love this. And I don't know that I have the capacity to do all this.
Yeah.
But it was capturing like the energy of people in the community rather than kind of coming from a top-down like pastor going, we're going to do this, as opposed to like a group of people all saying like, we want to do this.
Well, and the we becomes more possible, right?
It does.
Katie, as you were talking, Ken Deem was a beloved pastor in the Central Texas Conference forever and ever. He died unexpectedly. But one of his line that lives on was, God didn't wake you up in the middle of the night to give me more work to do.
I love that. I love that.
But that spirit, if you listen well to your leadership, to your community, you can cultivate that we in a more complete and more full way, right? So it's not all on Katie all the time.
Right. Well, and I'll say, our community recently bringing that to me, I said, okay, why don't we put all of y'all together in a room? And the next thing I know, our calendar is like booked. We have all these things going on. They're even creating the marketing for them for me, going in our Canva, and I was like, wow. Well, yeah, I should have done this earlier. Great.
Yeah. Well, and there's a level of, we talked about communities being willing to let go. There's a pastoral leadership being willing to trust and to let go in the midst of that. is, should be applauded for, right? And it's creating opportunity and space for the Spirit to kind of be alive and at work in different ways. We are coming to the end of our time together. As we kind of close this conversation up, is there one thing that you haven't said that you would want kind of a more traditional church or leader or pastor who's listening to this or watching this as one of our shining examples of churches that don't fit in a box for our clergy and lay leaders that are considering what's next and what's new? Do you have one piece kind of advice or one word for them to hear before we go?
I do. One thing we haven't really talked about too much is that when Union was started, it was really started with engaging young adults. That was kind of a key piece of what Union hoped to do. And that still is a key piece of what Union does and hopes to do. At the time we got started, that was millennials. And this is now shifting into Gen Z, which has been a learning curve for us as well.
Yeah.
But I'll say that when we engage with young adults, a lot of them have been burned by the church and wonder if church is a place for them. But the thing I would love for more traditional churches to know is that for a lot of young adults, the question is not about do they have faith or are they spiritual? The question is about their trust in the institution of church, and feeling like they don't have that. I think that's where that repetition of authentic comes in for us, right? Because folks are looking for that and want to know that they can really put their life behind something they value that is shared by another organization. And so I think that is something the larger church is really going to have to figure out in the coming years, because we know that young adults have not engaged the church in the way that previous generations have. And so I guess what I would like to offer is be encouraged that the young adults do have faith and do have spirituality and do want to engage that, and know that a lot of the hindrance is a distrust of the institution.
Okay.
And so how do we bridge that gap? And obviously, if somebody had the golden answer to that, we would know.
Yeah.
But
if this were 20 years ago, you'd write a book and it'd become a bestseller. I don't know what the
right. So it's not easy work.
Sure.
But be curious and try something different, try something new, and don't be afraid to do that, because even if it quote unquote fails, you still learn something along the way, and hopefully that's valuable as well.
Amen.
I will say to echo, well, when it comes to like earning that trust of people, I think I have been struck by the moments when someone in leadership or someone part of our community, or when maybe I first started coming, there was a trust given to me that I was a little surprised by, because I think in a lot of traditional church contexts, there's a like, oh, well, we know like so-and-so's been here for 15 years. We can trust them to like be in leadership on this thing.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I was a little shocked at times where it's like, I've been here 3 weeks, or I just showed up and y'all are asking me to contribute to worship or to give communion or to be a part of and involved in very real discussions about like what are we doing at church. So I think when it comes to like earning that trust from people, I think it's one of the easiest things is to give people entrust them with whether it's like it's starting a Bible study or it's doing a death cafe or doing giving them the space and trusting that they what they are going to do is holy and is going to further the kingdom of God. Because I think a lot of times we get stuck in this like, well, people have to earn our trust as like an institute, and really the reverse is true, that we need to be entrusting more to our laity, and kind of let them run with it and go with God and see what happens.
And just one more thing, because I'm a pastor and I have to. Along those lines, I think that has been a real gift at Union. Like our worship is planned by a worship planning team. I'm not deciding what we talk about. I mean, I'm in the room and I can contribute to that conversation, but letting people let you know what they want to talk about, right? Yeah. And what they're interested in engaging with is a great first way to kind of connect with your neighbors and your people.
Amen. Katie, thank you so much for your time today. Andrew, thank you for your time and for saying yes to that invitation to Coffee Shop Church many years ago. And thank you for joining us today on Pod Strangely Warmed. We are on episode 99, which means next week is what? 100. It not anything special other than persistence, but we are excited for it and we hope you are too. Until then, I'm Daniel Hawkins, and this has been Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more.
Make any strangely warmed jokes.
I had a opportunity.
I was like, yeah, I'm weirdly heated to be here. Strangely, oddly toasted, oddly crisped. There aren't a ton of synonyms for warmed.
Right, right.
My temperature is idiosyncratically raised a little bit to be here.